Okay, today we're gabbing with Sarah. Sorry. Today we're gabbing with Sarah Hearon, a deputy digital editor at Us Weekly. Sarah and I operate in the same sort of Bravo adjacent world and spent a lot of quality time together at BravoCon this past fall. She also covers and interviews Bravo celebrities professionally. So I'm excited to have Sarah on to get her latest thoughts on all the Bravo happenings, Summer House, Vanderpump Rules, The Valley, and some Jersey. Sarah, thanks for coming on. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. Every time the Bravo group chat goes off, I get a pit in my stomach because I'm like, what am I missing? But also I get so excited because I'm like, what am I
Yes.
missing? So
No,
it's both.
it's both. Sometimes you'll look at your phone, there'll be 80 texts in there, and you're just like, oh, this is
Yes,
happening. That's a safe space to air out a lot of our thoughts. So I really appreciate that space that we have.
it is. It's good.
Um, okay, have you overall like been enjoying this spring that's been like pretty light on Housewives and heavy on the younger Bravo shows?
Ooh, what a question. I think I was for a long time, but once I started, even though the first couple episodes of Jersey, there hasn't been too much really to dive into, it reminded me that I miss my housewives. I thought I was like satisfied, because I love the Valley, love Summer House, Vanderpump, even when it's not good, it's like very watchable.
Right.
And I enjoy all those shows, but it watching the professionals do it made me be like, oh, I miss the Housewives. And hearing about Orange County coming soon, like, makes me so excited.
So excited. I haven't been this excited for Orange County in quite some time. So love that for them.
One of my hottest takes is that I think Orange County's good even when it's bad. Like, I will watch those seasons that the last couple years, like when Tamara left, whatever people want to talk about. I still found that one of the most like watchable shows. I don't know why.
I think since Heather came back was very watchable. I didn't love
Yes,
it like in
okay.
those like 1 or 2 years right before that, but I'm with you. I think it's like just like kind of down the middle classic Housewives in some
Yeah.
ways, you know?
Shannon Bedore, like, I don't
Yeah,
know. I could just watch her do anything.
one of the best,
One of
truly
the
one of the best
best.
to do it. Totally. All right, Sarah, let's start with Vanderpump. We're two out of three parts into this reunion. Where do
Mm.
you stand so far?
Well, this reunion just made me really sad,
Yeah.
because of the Joe of it all. Um, Joe should not have been on our TV screens. She's not,
She's not built
sh-
for this.
she's not built for this. And honestly, it's really hard because Schwartz has always been one of those people on the show, characters, whatever, who, as everyone has said many times, like always kind of got like a lot of credit for nothing. And like Katie always kind of looked like the villain and this or that. And it's been great to have Katie kind of have like her moment. But then with that, like Schwartz was like, at least you kind of rooted for him. And this was like one of the first times, even though he's been horrible so many times for different reasons, this was like, oh, like horrible to watch him gaslight this girl who's not built for TV, who does not have an ally in this room.
Mm-mm.
And I will say it gave Lala a very likable moment to be like, can you stop lying? Like that just like I was like, oh God, like you need Schwartz to be likable Schwartzy. And this was maybe some of the most unlikable I've ever felt about him. And we watched this man pour a drink on Katie's head. Like
Literally. Yeah.
it
Yeah. I
upset
think,
me.
yeah, it was sort of, I loved Lala, Katie, and Ariana, honestly, like kind of
Mm,
all kind of pushing back on him. Not just, he just wasn't validating Joe and how she thought about their relationship or whatever their situationship was. And like,
mhm,
I understand that, like, at the time that they were entangled, like, if he couldn't bring himself to call that a relationship at that
right.
time, or like he couldn't, it was just after the divorce, all these things. But like, in hindsight, for him to still not sort of be able to validate that and just like admit that like they were essentially together just felt like lame. And I don't really understand why. Now I feel like maybe he's just like embarrassed by it, which like again, like I feel bad for Joe in that way. But
Yeah.
that's kind of the sense that you get, that he's like embarrassed to say that he was with her.
And like all things considered, I know she's like was technically a willing participant in this. And,
Right.
she is even coming to the reunion. That's like an extra step. But he knows deep down, like he's the reason she's on this show. And
Yeah.
he should feel some sense of like, I'm gonna protect you or at least have your back or not actively like downplay any moment we've ever shared together. Like it made me uncomfortable. And I know like I'm not some big Joe apologist. Like I'm not saying like, put
No.
her on the show, but it just didn't feel like a fair fight. And I feel like it also got a lot of airtime for someone and something we're not really getting real explanations about. Like it just was not this both parts of the reunion I feel like haven't gotten to anything. So I'm excited that I know they're saving it like the big fourth wall
Right.
break, and I think it's going to be really good. I think it's going to be really interesting to have them watch it. I think that was smart. So they didn't come in like swinging like the way they did last year, but I also think it's made it a little boring and a little bit like why do we care to talk about some of these things?
For 20 minutes, right? Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt for Joe in that it felt like he brought her onto the show and then he just sort of let her float around and try to
Yeah.
fight for her own. And like it just didn't, it was never going to work that way. But like, I can't fully feel bad for her because I don't
Right.
believe that she didn't know about Rachel and Tom.
Definitely.
You know, it's like she was so in their orbit and so close to their orbit at the time that the affair was happening that like I guess she's like an unaware person who like kind of is like la di da, but like I still don't believe she didn't know. You know what I mean? And so I just wish
She definitely knew. She
a thousand
definitely,
percent. So it's like I can only feel so bad for her. But there, you know, to feel sympathy for Joe, I think says a lot about how she's being treated.
exactly. And that's what's even like, oh, ooh, like it's just, it doesn't feel fair. And I think anyone who's been on this show for a long time, the gloves are kind of off to some degree. They are very much know what you signed up for. And this girl is not. But if that's what also they were fighting about, like, let's dive into that, like about the affair, like as much as we all are over Scandival to some degree, like
Right.
that is interesting. I don't know if
It's a
they
new
did press
perspective
hard
on it.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, about her perspective. Like, I don't know. Instead, we're like finding out if she wants to date Aaron Rodgers. Like, it was just like very
Yeah,
random.
I was like, I'm good. I'm good. And then for Allie to have the same time on stage as Joe just felt insulting to me.
I feel like Alice should have been out there the whole time.
Yes, she was a Scandal whistleblower for God's sakes. Put some respect on her name.
100%. And also, like, she has an interesting perspective. She was
Yes.
at all the group events. Like, it's the same thing. I feel like because the cast is a little smaller, we're getting a lot of Lala. We're getting a lot of Schwartz. Like, I think someone like Allie, who's like pretty level-headed and is in all the group scenes, the girls, she has a very interesting point of view. She's kind of the only one who's friends with everyone.
Right.
Like, she could be a narrator light versus maybe Lala being so intense or like two
Right.
extremes. Like I think they should have had more Allie.
I
Who
completely
knew?
agree. Let's get into Lala because I feel like once again, Lala is the most activated, the most vocal on the reunion, which like she's good at a reunion. Like she is skilled at this. It's not she's maybe not the most like self-aware person right now, and she's not really exactly doesn't seem fully aware about how she's coming off, but like at least
Mhm.
she clocks the fuck in for a reunion. And I have to respect that. But I want to talk about this whole thing that like was between part one and part two, where she brought up this conversation that her and Katie had on the phone, it sounded like, where Katie was
Mhm.
basically venting about Ariana, like around the time when the Broadway announcement happened. She felt like she wasn't there for her for starting their business, all these things. Like it felt like a normal thing where like here's a safe space with another friend who knows both of us where I can vent. Like every friend does that. That's very normal. And it seems like Ariana like was totally fine with it or was already aware that Katie thought these things and like they had worked it out, gotten past it. But Lala
Mhm.
brought it in with the like mentality of like, oh, I don't think Katie was transparent this season because she one time complained about Ariana and their business.
Right.
And like, did that land at all for you? Was it at all the sort of like gotcha moment that I think Lala thought it was for her?
Not so much, but I do like a part of me, I feel like you kind of said it perfectly. Like I do agree, like Lala locks in at the reunion. This is fair for her to say. I mean, it's not
Yes.
great. It's not nice. It's not something I'd want my friend to do, but I'm also not on a reality show. And this is like classic Bravo. Like you say something on text or in between
Yep.
seasons, you plot something, you whatever. Like you should know anything I say is fair game, no matter how close you allegedly are to your co-star. So do I think it was a nice thing to do? No. Do I think it was fair in reality TV world? Yes. Do I it didn't land though because Ariana, whether she knew or just chose in that moment,
Right.
I'm not
Protected
taking the
Katie, kind
debate.
of. Yeah.
Katie and I can go talk about this if it really bothered me, which was very smart as the sandwich
Yes.
shop is now open as we speak to
Agreed.
protect their friendship and their peace. I don't know how they played it. I don't know if it's just genuinely real and have already worked about this, or Ariana, I mean, she's just coming off so like mature and
Unbothered.
smart and unbothered and like it's kind of fascinating to watch. in its own way. Like I wouldn't say it makes the most compelling like fight Vanderpump what we're expecting,
Yeah.
but when you think about it, the way that she's been able to kind of like take a step back and not immediately like fire back or this or that or it's incredible on her. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think it says a lot about how close Katie and Ariana are, or how much they're willing to protect the business or anything. It is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I do like, I mean, I've said this a million times, but I just feel like Vanderpump these days is at its best when it does sort of acknowledge the on camera, off camera dynamic that like that's the most intriguing sort of like avenue
Yep,
for them to continue down. So like, and I think that Lala probably recognizes that, but I think that Ariana and Katie just like kind of have this united front that they're the only two approaching the show right now in the way that they are approaching it by like protecting an
totally.
element of their actual life and not putting
Hmm.
it all out there. So like I respect it, I guess.
And
And again, it's like Lala. It's a conversation that Lala and Ariana had. Like she might not understand the boundary, but she should respect the boundary as Ariana
yeah,
respected her boundary with Randall. So like, yeah,
it's just hard because Lala is so polarizing and
yeah,
every season like comes in so strong with this take, and then if you play it back like you can find the hypocrisy, and that's fine. People grow, people change, whatever, but it's hard to have her be the face
yeah,
of anything because she has so much history, not so great history with certain things and these declarations and then changing her mind. She's so strong-willed and like it's hard for her to be the voice of anything. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, 100%. And like, I also think that like she brought up this conversation and like they were like, no, it's okay, we're fine, whatever. But then like her and Schwartz kept like badgering and being like, but like Ariana, like, are you offended by that? Like Ariana, like, do you feel like are you surprised by that? Like they were trying to like drive this wedge between Katie and Ariana that just felt like there was an agenda there, and I
Mhm.
didn't. Again, it kind of takes away from the effectiveness of Lala's approach to this.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even Katie did a decent job of being like, yeah, I said some of those things. I was, a little taken aback when she got on Broadway when they went around the room. And it really did. Like, Sheena is so wild for so many reasons. And like, I never want Sheena off my television screen.
Never.
I worry about her. And I do genuinely like, I can't relate to the way she reacts to things, but I genuinely think she thinks that like she is staying up at night worried about this. Like this is genuinely just Sheena. And like
Yeah.
most of us can look back and be like, okay, like she does make it about herself, but I think she really cannot help it. And it was so dark and sad when she told the story about being in Dancing with the Stars and like everyone else in the room. And I watched the extended version this morning, so I don't know if all of this was in there, but she went around the room and said that like everyone at Dancing with the Stars knew that Ariana was going to Broadway but her. And like the fact that she even felt like she had to like when Andy asked like who knew and she felt like she had to tell that story, which then
Right.
just makes it sadder. It's like, oh God, like
Yeah.
what are we doing here? And whereas
I
Katie's just like, yeah, it made it hard, but like we'll get over it. Like they just
right.
approach things so differently.
Approach things so differently, and it's like I think with Sheena sometimes I wish that she would like take some breathing room or just like
Hmm.
look like get her head above the clouds like for just like 5 minutes just to like get some perspective on it. But I think that she's just so in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she like this is and like it's not a criticism. Like this is her like this is what makes her money.
Yeah.
And like I get why they're worried about it, but I'm just like
It's
ah
hard to make a show about wanting to make a show. Like
yeah
that's why this break, this whatever, like we'll see, but
yeah
it really is the only thing that makes sense because they need things to happen in their life to talk about versus talking about
the
the
same shit
show.
over and over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the same stuff. Or like it's this big, like it was a great idea to break the wall. I get it. But then now that we did, I don't want to watch 22 more episodes of them talking about the
Hmm.
healthiness of the show and what's good for the show. Like you got to let these people live and you got to let Sandoval and whatever this girlfriend is do something crazy. Maybe she'll be a character. Hopefully Schwartz's girlfriend is down to be on the show. Like have these people live a little. Maybe someone messy will get hired at the sandwich shop. Like new blood and also like new time, and then they won't be like Ariana or Katie Lala and Sheena and them, like their points aren't wrong, but like they're self-producing to such an extreme that like it's not going to be fun to watch. It's going to be like that Weird Hills reboot where
Right.
like
Right.
Misha Barton
Totally.
thought she was on a scripted show and the rest of them that was great. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to lose that. And I think these are still great people and there's still magic there on this show, but it's like it can't be a show about a show.
No. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I totally get that. So that's what you want
Yeah.
for the future of the show. You want it to take this break, but then
Hmm.
to just kind of get back into the swing of things, maybe introduce a couple new people that are exciting and like call it a day.
Yes. And I know they're going to be filming the Valley, so it's going to make it hard, but I do think it would have been at its best if it lived in a Shondaland type universe where Grey's Anatomy is your flagship, your Vanderpump Rules, but you watch little episodes of Private Practice because your friends are over there.
Yeah.
Station 19, whatever. Insert whatever, crossovers. So I do think even to keep us in, it would have been better if they were on at the same time and it almost like they did crossovers all the time since allegedly these people are all real friends. But if we're not going to do that, I hope that I don't want Sheena and Lala and them to be full-time cast members on the Valley. I know that's what people are like asking for, but I do want them to go to group parties,
Yeah.
to be messy, and then have our Valley friends come over to Vanderpump and be at, the opening of whatever and kind of create this world the way we kind of have your Paige and Craig crossing over on Southern Charm and Summer House, but more organic because it's not just because of one relationship. It's because they are all actually friends.
I love this idea. I never like presented it in that way, and I think that's fantastic. It's Vanderpump Land, you know.
Yeah.
It's yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's amazing.
Shondaland is shaking at the idea.
Okay, so you mentioned the Hills reboot, and I've seen
Mhm.
somebody say somewhere like the Valley is what the Hills reboot thought it was doing, basically.
Mhm.
And I think I see that. I think the Valley is like it genuinely feels like this next step in life, like where the Vanderpump Rules people feel a little bit frozen in time, a little bit,
Mhm.
and like there's like a friction there. I think the Valley, it's like it is about when millennials hit this time, and like you do have babies, you do get married, you do try to buy a house, and like the struggles that come with that.
Mhm.
So the latest Valley drama
Mhm.
is this Jackson Brittany situation where like he is
It's being Jax.
he's being Jax, he's speaking to her in like this very disturbing way, and like she said she has had 2 drinks. He's basically accusing her of having a drinking problem. She just says she feels sick. They had that big blow up in front of the entire group. How did you react to that as a viewer?
Oh, I mean, it's so icky.
Yes.
It's hard to watch. I think it was great to see the other women specifically on the show have Britney's back. I mean, Britney's never had a problem with having friends on any of these shows,
That's
so
a good
she
point.
clearly must, in real life be a nice person because we've seen her have drama with Jax, and I'm not saying she's perfect, I'm sure she's not, but like she's always had a group back her, so there's something to that. And this was a good example of that. I think that go back to those episodes of Vanderpump where like the doctor told her not to drink because of her stomach and she
I had
took tequila shots
ulcer.
anyway. Yeah, she had an ulcer. So I imagine she does have some sort of issue with not issue with drinking, but the way her body reacts to alcohol. If she
Right.
is choosing to ignore that, that is her choice. It's not like she's out here drunk driving or hurting anyone technically but her own body, so it seems. I don't know her actual health, whatever, and that's for her and her doctor to figure out. But for your husband, I mean, she has a very good point. Your husband, the person who's supposed to have your back more than anyone ever, let alone in front of cameras, let alone if they wanted to, they could have edited that. If this was The Hills back in the day, that would have aired as Brittany needs to go to rehab, the way Kristen Cavallari had a drug problem,
Right.
which they all came out later and they were like, yeah, we made that up because she like looked tired. Like if we were doing reality TV the way we did it then, like that's what it would have been.
Right.
And you think your husband, the person who brought you into this world in general, who you both decided to jump back into, would have your back. I'm just happy that they are separated now because even though it caused a lot of confusion when the show started airing and this or that, and people had questions, it makes me feel better watching it because I know that she somehow, somewhere along the way, figures out that this is not okay. And we actually know that versus like some of those old seasons of Vanderpump when you watch and it's like she's making these declarations, but then in real time, like, oh, well, they got married or this or that. You know what I mean? That's what sometimes the delay on these shows is hard for so many reasons. And sometimes it's like a spoiler when someone breaks up or
Yeah.
whatever. But I've taken like solace in the fact that Jesse and Michelle are not together and that Brittany and Jax are not currently together because I can watch this mess and be like, it's okay. Like everyone's safe. The kids are not watching this actively because we're all apart where we should be.
No, that's such a good point. It's like that she sees the light in a real way this time. That
Yeah,
like I mean, even in this episode, it's like Jax had sort of a Freudian slip where he was like, "Well, our
absolutely.
marriages are sort of on the last drags," and they were like, "What you said? Your marriage? Like we
I
ours?"
loved that.
And he was like, "I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that." But like they were clearly at this moment. And like, I think on, again, on a lot of other shows, like you just said, like at the reunion, they'd be together, or at
Hmm.
in the next season, they'd just be back to, and then it feels like it's just for the show. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, this is like genuine. Brittany's finally kind of breaking through that barrier of like, my husband's a bad person and he doesn't treat me well, you know, and
Yeah.
like he's shaming me. He's taking what he's taking her bad reaction, her body's bad reaction to alcohol, and turning it into her having a drinking problem instead of like being like, oh, like maybe you shouldn't be drinking because your stomach is
I
bad,
feel
and
bad that you
historically.
feel sick. I want
Exactly.
you to have fun. It's not that. It's like you're ruining the night because you're in the bathroom and you're a bad mom. You're a mom. You're not in college.
He
It's like
shames her. Yeah, it's really
crazy.
it's crazy to watch. And like you know, even like when he was in the kitchen and Brittany was overhearing it basically, and they were like, no, she only had two drinks, and he
Hmm.
was basically like shaking his head like, no, that can't be true. But then he goes into the bedroom and he was like, I just wanted clarity from them when they said you had two drinks. I was like, okay, okay. But that wasn't his reaction. He's literally lying to her. It's like
And it's so nuts because they decided to go back into this world. Like they had a break. And I do think it's almost like because Brittany and Jax, their relationship has been on TV literally since the day. I mean, she showed up to Los Angeles and we were there. Like
cameras
it's
were on.
it's crazy. That Jackson Brittany Take Kentucky spinoff is one of the darkest things. It rivals Bethany Ever After. Like those are some of the darkest things. Anytime Bravo gives someone a spinoff, unless it's Candy, which those have some dark moments too, but most of the time it's just like we're going skiing. Those
Porsche's was dark too. Yeah.
yeah, Porsche's were dark. Like those spinoffs that are supposed to be like this happy couple going to do something are a lot of times in real time it feels dark, but looking back, they are always like the craziest things that have ever happened. Like they're all nuts. But they had this break from reality TV. I think they like got a little complacent. They go back on. Now she's almost like a first season housewife who's getting her freedom back and getting
Mm.
like her retro like the housewives who kind of go on to like get divorced. Like she's kind of having that. And I think it's kind of incredible to watch. I don't know if they're actually gonna legit be separated. I mean, you have him Jax doing what Jax does, tweeting like, "Remember this was months ago. Like we're happier and we're figuring it out." And then you have Brittany posting like "My boyfriend's out of town" T-shirts, and I'm like, "Okay, what are we doing here?" Like, and the fact that we're not getting a reunion to talk about it is just so
It's
devastating.
criminal. Yeah, it's
I don't
criminal.
get it. I
I
really
don't
don't.
get it. And apparently they're not starting filming until July. So I feel like they're missing a lot of this.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is, it's gonna be so good. Like when
Oh
it
my God. I
comes
mean,
back,
listen,
it's
and
gonna be
maybe
good.
it's one of those things where you just build it up and like we start off season two with being like totally different than it was season one. But like
Yeah.
Kristen, I don't know if you saw this, but like Kristen did comment somewhere that they picked cameras back up for the end of this season, which I hadn't
Okay.
realized. So
Yes,
we'll see a little bit of that
I heard that too. I think I heard that once Jackson Brittany like made the actual decision that they picked that up to cover it, and then because of like Janet having her baby, like I think there was like enough to like do it
on
might be like
every
half an
couple.
episode or one
Right.
more or something of like here's what you missed. And I do think maybe there's something to be said for like sometimes the reunions do a lot of damage
That's true.
and sometimes they help, but sometimes they do a lot of damage. And there's been a lot to go down with these people on a first season. And I know obviously Jax, Brittany, Kristen, it's not their first rodeo, but like it's a lot and you're getting a lot out of these people. So like would they go too far and cross boundaries that we can
Maybe.
come back from in a setting like that? Like can they be trusted, this group, in a reunion? Like would it crash and burn and would they not be able to film together? Like we need Janet to get over the not inviting Kristen and what like we can't make it worse before like because I want to watch it. So maybe Bravo's just like it's not worth two episodes of them like going insane to then versus a whole season of letting them film. I don't know, just trying to get in that
No,
mindset.
no, I think that's very valid. And I think that like there's a, you know, Brittany, Jackson, Kristen, like you just said, it's not their first rodeo, but because it is their second rodeo and they know what it's like to not have a show, I think that like, and I think we're seeing it a little bit with Kristen on this season and a little bit
Mhm.
with Jax. It's like they're doing a lot and it's amazing TV. I'm not complaining about that. I'm not criticizing them for that. But like I
Mhm.
think that in a reunion setting, they could try to do too much because like
Yeah.
there is like a desperation there just to maintain this second chance, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I agree, having a little bit of space there. You mentioned housewives that go on to get divorced.
Mhm.
Jesse and Michelle, did they go on the valley to get divorced?
They didn't not go on the valley to get divorced. I mean, I think that especially Michelle was like, listen, I'll do this, but like, don't be mad at me if I'm like done at the end. Like, I feel like her mind was so made up. Jesse's really hard for me to
Me
read.
too.
It's very like wild watching him come back from that like one day retreat and like talk about how he's healed, and then they got into that like weird fake fight on the beach where they were like they weren't actually physically fighting, but like that was like just
But like
everything
there was
about
something, but there was something there.
yeah, and everything about them makes me like slightly uncomfortable. And I wish they didn't have a kid because I feel like they'd be so much more fun to like go in on if they didn't have a young child. It sounds
Right.
bad, but you know what I mean?
No,
Like
I know what you're saying.
it's not quite as fun when there's a 3-year-old, but they're like some of the most like dysfunctional, secretly delusional people we've had on a show in a minute. And I think that they both were very aware that this was probably going to open up the cracks that they knew were there. And it was kind of like, well, they're there anyway. Like they probably would have gotten divorced no matter what. Why not, go film with our friends? And then it probably was worse than they thought it would be when all of a sudden, like, there's the accusations. Maybe they didn't know that was going to happen, but I mean, obviously they had to know that their marriage was not like in a good
In the
spot. They
best
didn't go on this
place.
show thinking they'd be, the cutest couple to come out of the valley.
Right. And they're not exactly heartbroken. And they don't seem exactly heartbroken that like things aren't necessarily going well for them.
No, their minds, especially Michelle's mind is made up. She's almost like just waiting to get, I think, through the filming to officially do it because I think she maybe didn't know, like, we come on this show as a duo, like, whatever. Who I don't think they filmed for that long. I'm sure it was kind of like almost like a backwards therapy boot camp of let's get through filming and see where we're at the end. Whereas, like, obviously, at the end, the answer is going to be worse. Like, there's no
Right.
way it's going to help.
No, no, it does not. It doesn't help. The
No,
lies we tell ourselves.
we have
Exactly.
history to prove
Right.
that. Like, I don't
Right.
care who you are. Like, it's going to make it
Mm-mm.
worse.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I mean, Kristen and Zach, they had that great little, they weren't really on this episode as much, but they had their great little spa day, like being petty from their spa day, which I loved. There's Janet and Jason, who I think are like really solid couple. I know that people seem like really strong. They have really strong feelings about Janet, which I like. I guess my interview with her a couple weeks ago, like she said some things, but like I think she's really good at this reality
I like
star
her.
thing. Me too. Like I think that she's operated. I like her. Like I really, and I had a great experience interviewing her. So I just like I think people are so in Kristen's corner and they want her like on every single episode that it's sort of coming off that way. And like not everything Janet has done on this season is like something that you can like back up necessarily. But like
Right.
I don't
It,
know.
I
People
always
feel
am.
so strongly.
People feel so strongly. It's kind of fascinating. I've never been a good like team this person or that person,
Yeah.
mostly because I change my mind like every other week. And because I like to watch the fights. Like I enjoy watching them try to then outsmart the show and uninvite. Like sometimes it goes too far, yes, and we've seen that on Vanderpump where like we're breaking the wall a little too much. Like you do have to show up, you have to be willing to film with them. And it's only your first season, so it's a little hard to like make those rules. But if that's your genuine response to not invite someone, if you are being messy, if you are bringing drama, as long as you don't like jeopardize, like bring in weird lawsuits or like threaten
Yeah.
anything where it's like, okay, you did sign up for the show, stop. I don't like it when we're threatening our cast members with litigation.
Yeah, I agree.
But I like watching conflict. So I don't understand why when someone feels so strongly the other way, their instinct is get rid of them or I don't want them on my show. It's like, no, we want to watch. I thought we are watching this for conflict. Like that's the
Yeah,
point. No?
exactly. Exactly. I want to see that post-trip confrontation. I want to see when once Janet she's had her baby, like she people have accused her of hiding behind her pregnancy basically and like using that as an excuse. But like one, she's like literally 7.5 months pregnant. So
Right. Like
like
it's just
what
a
if she's gonna jeopard
reality.
right? It's literally the reality. But also like, but now in season two, where she would not be pregnant, like what does that dynamic look like? Like and like
Mhm.
what can she just say like, no, I think Kristen's just too reckless of a person. I don't know, but like I'd like to see that conversation happen. So
Yeah.
I'm here for it. And again, like I just love how entrenched these relationships are in this first season. It really feels substantial. So
And it's fascinating that they all were around them. So even if it's their first season on a show, like Janet, we know specifically, like is friends with Sheena,
mhm.
has been around, like Kristen forever. Like she watched the Vanderpump fans like be the way they are and what it's like to be around a Bravo person. So I think it really would have been interesting if she wasn't pregnant this first season
I know.
because I think the gloves really would have been off. Maybe too much though. Like it might have gone too far, but I think it's fascinating and like the stakes are real. And I don't know. I think she's wild television, and that's what I'm
Yeah,
looking for. I
that's what
don't
I'm
want
looking
any of
for.
these people to be my best friend. So I just think it's wild when people take such strong sides, um, to the point where they like want someone off the show, or they're like in their I mean, obviously, like to DM or anything like that is always crazy. So like, there's nothing, whatever. But I think it's a good sign for the show that it's bringing out this in people. But
Yeah, I
I watch
agree.
it differently. Like, I can never pick when like I'm supposed to pick a team for something. Like I'm bad at it. I don't know why.
Well, I think that like you us flip flopping different weeks, like that's kind of what it's made to. That's the formula of these shows is to make you feel
Right.
differently.
And
So
like be smart that you're watching a show. Like there, or maybe it's just
exactly, they
the
weren't
writer
too in
girl
it.
in me that I have to kind of the bias
Writer
like has
girl, I
to
love it.
go out, yeah, right. Go out the way a little bit. Like not saying, whatever. You can say whatever you want about the media, but like it maybe it's just the way I approach these shows. It's like I'm looking for entertainment, I'm looking for drama,
Yeah,
I'm looking for things that aren't going too far either way. But
yeah,
like I've never understood Bravo fans scare me when they like come so hard for either person.
I agree. I agree. Okay, so speaking of teams, I think
Yes.
that one of the things about the season of Summer House has been like there's been a roller coaster with Lindsay and Carl, the sort of central
Hmm.
storyline of this season. I've seen so many people on social media be like, I was Team Lindsay before, then I was Team Carl, and now I'm back to Team Lindsay, and now I'm back to
Hmm.
like the team they shouldn't have gotten married. And like it's been this, I think that's part of the reason why the season has been so good is that there has been the ups and downs of like seeing both sides of how this relationship crumbled.
Yeah.
What's been your experience watching this season? I mean, it's just been incredible,
It
honestly.
has been so incredible. I think there's so many things about the season of Summer House that makes it good. I think it's nice that the women in the house and Lindsay have had like a better season also because I think that if it was coming at her on all, whether you're a fan of Lindsay or not, I think it's never fun to watch someone always like be the one that people
Be
are picking
ganged up
on.
on. Yeah.
Not that she can't handle it, but I think that that has helped a lot for the show and like the healthiness of the show is watching. I think it's been really interesting to watch the women talk to Lindsay in a way that like humanized her. I think that same thing with Carl. I think watching Carl and mostly more with like the Kyle and Amanda scenes versus but even watching like having someone like Jesse Solomon come in with fresh eyes and
Right.
just be like, whoa. Like they've been able to serve as the audience a little bit to be like, this is not really a normal healthy
They're
relationship.
asking the right questions.
Yeah, they're asking the right questions. I think it was tough because I think I've been saying this a little bit with my friends, and I don't know where it totally stemmed from. And I don't necessarily know if it was Lindsay who said this first, or if it was the media who said this first, if it was a blind item or whatever. But it was very tough to go into this season with the narrative that Lindsay was blindsided. Again, I don't even remember where that came from. It might not have even been her. But because those first couple of episodes came on so strong with maybe the Lindsay's fault in it or what struck Carl with the drug stuff that like whatever. I think that that's made it difficult at first because it was like, okay, well, you weren't blindsided. Like, that's the part that I think it's one of those things that when something comes out before the show does, whatever the word is or like the media narrative, whether it's true or not, like it creates a scene. And blindsided was the buzzword around all of this, the same way best friend was the blind was the big word around Scandal that like whether Ariana and Raquel were that close I think they were, but like that was what was fixated on, right? Like that was her best friend. And this was like Lindsay was blindsided. And I do think there's holes in the blindsided element of it. But then watching like these episodes, I just want to shake Carl and be like, I know you were probably just trying to get through the season, but you should have ended it that second weekend because it's harder to defend you now. Or not that I'm even trying to defend it, but it's like I just feel like he has already broken up with her in his head. She has no idea. She does not necessarily see that. So now it's turning, and I guess it's where the blindsidedness comes from. But like it's just he's checked out and he should have ended it sooner. And while that would have made sharing this summer house very, very difficult, it would have been more authentic and it would have benefited him and I think her because the whole thing now is just weird to watch because it feels like he's checked out. That was a very long rant. I'm
No,
sorry.
no,
I'm
no.
very
I think
passionate.
that you mentioned a lot of good things. I think that last part, it's like it speaks to his inability to have the hard conversations with her. I
Right.
think that like that's why he didn't. I agree that he probably knew it was going to end or broke up with her in his head a while ago, much
Yeah.
earlier in this summer than we're seeing. But he has shown that he can't have these hard conversations with her, and I think that that's where I see the blind, like I see it being backed up that she was blindsided because even though they were having
Hmm.
all these issues, I think in her head, even if it wasn't necessarily realistic, these were all issues they would work out, and that even if like going into the wedding, like they were like still having issues, they would work them out. They were going couples theory,
Right.
whatever. That's kind of how I view it. But like, I totally agree that it's just these past couple episodes have been him checked out, and I think that that helps that helps people go on Lindsay's side more because he's
Hmm.
acting just kind of like indefensible, I think, a little bit in some of these things and some of these issues. And like, I don't know, it's been really wild. I think this past episode was a really unique episode because if you notice, basically you get halfway through the episode, there's been like one or two confessionals the entire time. It was
Yeah.
all
Oh yeah.
cameras capturing what was happening on this Sunday afternoon at the summer house. And it was like
Hmm.
there was Kyle and Amanda stuff, there was Carl and Lindsay stuff, and it was all happening. Kyle and Paige too, and it was like all this stuff happening at the same time. There wasn't that much narration about it from the confessionals, and I thought that it was a
Mm.
very unique viewing experience on this
Yeah.
show. And it's something that like Housewives can't do because like they don't have those voyeuristic cameras in the corner of bedrooms.
Hmm.
Um, but the Lindsay and Carl thing from this past episode, when he drove off, my my
Oh,
jaw my jaw was actually on the floor. Like I had an audible reaction of like he did not just do that.
that was one of the most like immature things we've seen on one of these shows in a minute. And again, it's coming from the person who's supposed to be engaged. He's a little older. This is not his first rodeo. Um, and versus like maybe a newbie like cast member who like isn't thinking about how that's gonna
Right.
look, or like, you know, doesn't owe this person who was their partner anything. That was very tough. But you're right. Like it's a good point of how like there wasn't as many confessionals. It wasn't choppy. Like I think it just goes to show that like this show at its best is when there are real relationships, and it's a
Yes.
hard show to cast. And I don't, it's not really, it's no one's fault. I just think that it's been very difficult to cast, and there's been highlights of every season. But this, I know everyone's like said a million times like how great West and Jesse are, but I think it can't be said enough because they fit in. And it just, it kind of feels like we're watching two different shows sometimes with like Kyle, Danielle, and Carl, and sometimes Lindsay. But again, nice seeing Lindsay interact with everyone. They're kind of on one show, and then the like younger generation almost has more now. Like they've kind of won over. Like it was just Paige, and like then she got Sierra, but like they lost Hannah. Like it's kind of always
Yeah.
been like these two shows, right? And it's fascinating to watch. And I think that, oh, I mean, Kyle and Amanda though is so dark in its own way.
It,
Like they're
it
not even
it's
getting as much whatever
oh my
because Lindsay and Kyle had
God.
like the
Right.
storyline going into the season. The world, the media, the Bravo fandom was ready for this. That like it's some dark stuff going on with those two.
It's just I mean, they continue to like serve up and let us in and like, they're a roller coaster too. And it's like I talk to people about the show, and it's like their issues are actually a little bit more divisive. Like I find people are either like kind of behind Kyle or kind of behind Amanda, and I actually
Mm,
find that it's kind of like a gender thing sometimes. Like I kind
yeah,
of see that, and I don't know. It's like I guess I see both sides, and we don't know everything about like how the business is doing and all these
right.
things, and like. Is this the best time for Amanda to be bringing this up? But like, does that really matter? And then like,
Hmm.
I don't know. There's all these questions that are very valid questions to be asking from both
Yeah.
sides.
And their whole thing also because they're so wrapped up in this show, they kind of remind me, I feel if I made this comparison, but like a little bit of Schwartz and Katie. Different. Like I think that their issues are very different, but the fact that like one of their main ties is this show. And if Summer House ended, like what would happen to Kyle and Amanda? Would they go off and figure out this suburban life? Or would they realize maybe this show is keeping them together to keep this cycle going? Is it editing and we're all, what do we know? I don't know. It could be any of those things. But when she was on Watch What Happens Live and they were asking her about this fight and Kyle's like breakdown, she literally was like, yeah, I mean, I love him. So like, I guess it was sad, but like, I don't really care. Like, she was disconnected from the man. And like,
Hmm.
maybe she's just been on this show for so long and she's sick of having to answer questions and like they move on in their own way and that's how their relationship works and they're happy, healthy. Totally like, what do we know for real? But that to me was like, oh, like that's not exactly, I'm, not that it's anyone's fault. I don't even know whose team I'm on either for that, but like it just read as checked out to me.
Right. I do think that the show exacerbates all their issues. I mean,
Yes.
in past seasons, she would always say things like, I don't want to talk about this right now because, and to me, that meant like on
Yes.
camera, not like wait till Monday, basically.
Mhm. Yes.
Um, so like that's always been a factor, I think. And I also think that Amanda, especially in the past couple of years, has felt really torn between being Kyle's girlfriend and
Yep.
being with the Paige Sierra crew and like being like one of the girls. And I think that that's
Hmm.
like a totally valid like pickle to be in, you
Yeah.
know, because it's like you said, it is these sort of two generations in the house. And she is age wise and like sensibility wise very much more in line with the other part of
Hmm.
with that group of the house. And that's the last thing I want to talk about with Summer House is like I do think that the West and Sierra thing and the heating up of their summer romance and all these things has been such a good antidote to like the
Hmm.
bleakness of Lindsay and Carl and Kyle and Amanda. It's provided this like really hopeful thing that we can root for. And like it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like it's going to end in the way that I think a lot of people want it to end, but because
Hmm.
I don't think they're still together. But like most of this season has been this like, oh my God, like they're so cute. Like, is this the beginning of something? I'm so
Hmm.
giddy watching it. She's so giddy.
Yep.
He's like obviously adorable. Like it's
It's
provided
fun.
this other thing to watch. I think it's been really necessary.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's been fun. I think that they've brought a nice new energy to the show. I think that it also, I mean, I assume they're not together, but I don't know. I think it's fun to have a question to have answered at the reunion. It's been a
Totally.
minute with these shows. Um, and I always say, as someone who's quote unquote part of the problem, since it's our job to try to figure it out, like sometimes you want to be surprised. And that's why when something like, Reality Von Tease happens, it's so exciting because no one knows. Like I can remember being at BravoCon thinking there's something was up, like they're not talking
Yeah.
to Monica, but like not thinking it was gonna be that. Like I'm sure some people knew, but like I genuinely didn't. And that's kind of gives me that where it's like obviously less extreme, but like I'm excited this reunion, there's so many things to be answered. There's so much to talk about. Whereas Summer House, I feel like in the past, the reunions aren't always like that
No,
explosive.
they're
Like,
not always that bad, that good. Yeah.
yeah. And maybe it's also because like these are people who now we're like so many seasons in that there's a little bit more at stake, but it's just been a minute since we've had huge relationships where both people are on the show versus just like, oh, like is Maya still with what's his name? Like, do I really care? No, like Oliver
Right.
or whatever. Like, I think that it just feels like the stakes have never been higher, which is so rare for season 8 of a show
Yeah.
that like I feel like Bravo, you kind of just like put on the air and was like, whatever. Like they don't
And it's
really,
peaking now. It's
it's
peaking now. I really
peaking.
think that. Yeah, I really think that. Okay, Sarah, the last 5 minutes,
Hmm.
Jersey. Don't need to spend too much time on it. It's only been a couple episodes, and I don't think the drama's really heated up yet. But we're seeing sort of like the hints, the cracks. You know, we're
Hmm.
seeing this past episode, Jackie and Margaret's cracks are starting to show, and that to me is one of the most compelling parts of this season. Is what happens between Jackie and Margaret, what pushes them away from each other.
Yep.
The Fessler factor is also really interesting to me, and like, is she going to be able to straddle the middle? Um, what's most intriguing to you, I guess, so far this season?
I mean, definitely Margaret and Jackie. I think you are totally right about that. That was like a big shock when we started seeing Jackie hang out with Teresa. It was like, whoa, like what is
Hmm.
happening? I think Jen Fessler is so entertaining for so many reasons. I think she's probably going to regret at all going over to the Teresa side because you can tell, like, is not getting how pissed they are.
Yeah.
And when I talked to Rachel Fuda a few weeks ago, like she is like, we're fine, but I mean, we haven't spoken in X amount of months. And I was like, okay, so you're not fine. Nothing's fine there. She's like, whatever. Like, it's nice to see, as even though it kind of sucks that it at its core, there's still kind of like a Melissa versus Teresa or like a Teresa versus the show or whatever. It's because these other friendships feel legit. Like Jackie and Margaret, like we're real friends. Like whether it's because Teresa somehow the catalyst, like there's real feelings there. So I do think it's intriguing. I think that it's refreshing the way that they, are filming it so far. I think it was interesting to watch um Bill turn down the invitation that Joe Gorga
Yes.
sent to come to the party. I feel like it's rare for Jen Aiden to turn down.
Show some restraint. Right. Exactly.
Yes, that was interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think the players are all there. I'm not totally sure. Like, I think Dolores being kind of like center is only going to bring good things. I think it's
Love this
about
for her and
time,
for us. Yep.
right? Like,
Yep. Sitting at that
she's,
table at that first scene. Oof.
oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. Heaven. Yeah. So I guess we don't really know yet, but like so far is Melissa and Teresa coexisting? Is that working for you? Like, I guess it's working for me, but like it's
Yeah,
not
it's not adding or taking it is what it is. I
right.
think it also kind of going into the season knowing It Is What It Is was a good way to do it because there is always so much hype. And I
Hmm.
think it was a bold move. Like, I understand when everyone was always like, you have to get rid of one, you have to get rid of one. Like, I understand that train of thought, but I think it was a bold move for Bravo to keep both of them. And that might sound silly because it's a very highly rated show. They're both very likable. Like, of course you keep both, but like it's not sustainable. So it was interesting move. I think it'll be a really good experiment. I think Jersey has always been a weird outlier
Hmm.
because of the family, but even back in the day when they would like they filmed that one reunion while they were already filming another season and it was like kind of a mess. Like I think in Jersey it's just like the emotions run so deep and the blood is very deep, thicker than water. So I think they need to do it. It bothers me that my instinct is like, well, what are they going to do next year? Because we're 2 episodes in, but like it's hard not to think about it like that.
Yeah, it is hard. People are already talking about like fire this person, and it's like Jesus
Right.
Christ. And I think that that's the last thing I want to talk about quickly is like what frustrates me about Jersey is that like I agree all the players are there, whatever,
Hmm.
but the noise outside of the show on social media and like the back end machinations of it just really frustrate me because I think
Hmm.
it makes what's happening on the show feel lower stakes. It makes it feel like we're not
Totally.
getting the full story. And like then you just, okay, let's wait for the reunion in 3 months. You know what I mean? Like I
Yes.
that to me takes away from the experience a little bit because you always feel like there's more going on than we're really privy to. And that's true for all the shows. But in this case, like you said, they're all so passionate about it. And like it's like so on steroids, honestly, that like it just it to me it just takes something away from it. And I don't know
Yeah.
how to put that into words.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think even going into the season, like everything that was like kind of like leaked or whatever about John Fuda and like his ex-wife, like there's a lot, and there always has been in Jersey, like these
And the
players
Jen
that,
Aiden stuff for like the fan
yes,
pages. Yeah.
right. Like you always hear things, even like back in like the Kim D days, like there was always like these players that weren't like housewives that would like kind of be stirring the pot or like mentioned. And like I almost envy sometimes people that are just watching like the season of Jersey, like without one, it being part of their job, but also like not being online, like to know this stuff. Like there's so much backstory. Like are to people who like don't follow this stuff, like even understanding, is it just fun to watch? Like, what is that like? Because
I know.
it's so much, like
We're too
noise,
in deep. Yeah.
right? Like I'd love to know, like, or does it bother an average Bravo viewer? Because do they not know what they're missing, or they're not reading between the lines of
Right.
like
Right.
whatever? Like,
Do they know that like do they even know that like at BravoCon there were two different panels and that it got literally
right.
into like a shouting match with a fan? Like I don't know. I don't think the average viewer really knows that.
I don't either.
I think somebody who's 50 minutes into this podcast knows that.
Yes, if they
You know
care enough. Yes, if
right,
they're a
right.
fan of yours, they know. If they
But
read us
like,
weekly,
but
they
you
know.
know what
But
I
like,
mean?
yeah,
It's a lot to keep track of. Well, we'll see with Jersey, I guess. I'm cautiously optimistic about
me
it.
too.
Yeah. Sarah, thanks for being so generous with your time. I loved a lot of these thoughts that you had. It's making me think differently about things now. Where can people find more of your work, follow you, do all the things?
Oh, well, thank you so much. This was so fun. I know we could talk forever.
Have a
I'm at Sarah Hearon on Instagram. Read usmagazine.com. If you don't already, there's obviously a lot of Bravo there. And if you happen to like The Bachelor at all, I do a lot of Bachelor stuff over at Us Weekly too. So when that comes back in July, hit me up for Bachelor takes because it's still on and I'm still talking about it.
still on, still talking about it. You're in the belly of the beast with that too, and I'll be checking it out for Golden Bachelorette. That's my
Yes,
shit.
Joan.
Oh
Love
my
it.
God, Sarah, thanks so much. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
I want to gab.